Everybody to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and this is freedomslips.com. All right, and my special guest for hour two is Nathanael Mallow, and I might have an issue with my audio, so I just turned it up a little bit. We'll see how that helps. Okay. And Nate lives and works in Southern California, right near Dismal Land, the Tragic Kingdom. He strives to be a quote unquote human being in the truest sense of the word. That is, he is honest with himself and tends to be open to making mistakes and corrections. By trade, he is a programmer and has a background in photography, art, math, construction, and sometimes humor. He has written several scripts and is currently working on a series of children's books, along with his niece, based on Billy Meyer's information. And along with that, he works actively to support the mission of which he is self-obligated. And what is that mission, you ask? Truth. We can all use some of that, right? And please welcome Nate to the show this evening. Hello there, Nate.
Hi, Solaris. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Just listening to your last interview, it was pretty good.
Yeah, she was brand new, and she said she was extremely nervous, but I think she did fine.
So. Yeah, it kind of sounded like, and I was listening, when she was mentioning Pendragon, I thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm. Just because I think the Meyer material talks about the history of King Arthur and stuff, and how Pendragon was actually the name of King Arthur's father. Mm-hmm. So
Billy Meyer
touched
on that, huh? That is interesting. I didn't realize Billy Meyer touched on that.
Yeah, actually, that's one thing about this is it goes into all realms of from the very mundane to the stuff that is I don't know, way far out, mm-hmm. if you will. Right. Mundane things is in the beginning they have. Well, let me go a little back. Billy Meyer, he's a farmer in Switzerland. He was born in 1937, and since he was 5 years old, he's been having face-to-face contacts with ETs, and during his time, I guess, the ETs and whatnot, his mission is to bring back the teachings of the spirit to mankind of Earth. I know that might sound hocus pocus to a lot of people and stuff, but spirit in this case is that which is. And some people call it creation, other people call it the source, other people might even call it God or whatever, but it's not supposed to be something that's necessarily outside of you, but something you're definitely a part of. Mm-hmm. Right. And
yeah. And how does he bring back the teachings? What is his way of bringing that back to the center of a person?
Well, I think his main writing is called the Goblet of the Truth, mm-hmm. And it's basically I've heard it described as a way to wash away belief, and that actually brings me to an idea, because in the New Age and in a lot of these fringe areas where we go and we listen to, and we are looking for answers and stuff. People talk about a consciousness awakening and stuff, and so I really want to know what that is, or that was. And so I did some thinking on it, and to me, awakening of consciousness means that we do away with belief. We start wanting to understand the reality we're in and how we affect that reality. And here I'm using the word belief, as accepting something as truth without, proper investigation, and also giving away your power to something outside of you. Mm-hmm.
I agree.
So
that's well said. Well, to me, it's also, when you talk about belief systems, to me, it's all part of a false matrix construct, because, and we probably touched on this before, maybe with Mark Snyder and his show, but a lot of what we see from day to day is a bleed through and a reflection of a false past, meaning we don't really know the history of what's happened here on the timeline on this world. It's all been edited, censored, and a lot of it's been, recreated to accommodate, I don't want to say ignorance, but a lot of people have been misinformed, so to speak. Would you agree on that or no?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree with that. I think that that's why. Anyways, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going a million miles ahead.
That's okay.
In my head.
Just go.
Okay.
Talk. My
So
last guest didn't talk much. It's fine. You're good. It's nice to have you on.
in the Maya context, it goes into ancient history. It goes into future events, and it even talks about present events. Uh, a little known fact, just going a little bit into the history of the U.S. When it's talked about George Washington being this guy, he was very clever in that he was actually the one who helped precipitated the War for Independence 13 years prior to the War for Independence. He led a brigade of English troops in order to drive a wedge between France and England, who were the powers at the time. So later on, to see France join our side for the War of Independence, he murdered a contingent with an ambassador under the guise of the I guess the crown at the time in England, George. So that that's in the material, and he kind of talks about that a little bit.
Right. And you're also working on decoding some of the was it older translations of the Billy Meyer material?
Yeah. So for me, it's not a first-hand thing. It's just I'm actually just help funding some of the stuff. But the book that actually has been recently translated is called the Talmudic Manual. There's a great site for people who are interested in it out there. It's called tjresearch.com, and basically the Talmudic Manual is the teachings of one of the prophets of the past whose name was falsified to Jesus Christ. And yeah, so if you're interested, take a look at that site. But it, let me give you one of the excerpts from the newest translation. Let me give you a little background. There's a man by the name of Isa Rashid, along with Billy, that found a tomb outside the city of Jerusalem. And inside the tomb, they found resin-encrusted scrolls. These scrolls told the story of the prophet Emmanuel. And Isa Rashid happened to be also a linguist, as well as an ex-Greek or Orthodox priest. He also spoke German and Hebrew, and it just happened that the scrolls were written in Hebrew. So he got about translating the scrolls. Things got kind of hairy for him. He couldn't handle it, and he ended up losing the scrolls to a fire in a refugee camp that was attacked in Jordan, I think in the late 70s. But before that, he had mailed out his translation to Billy Meyer, and Billy published them without doing a lot of proofreading, and so what they were to find out later on, Billy and his ET friends found out that that the information that Isa had actually injected into the information a lot of his own religious upbringing beliefs. So there was elements of truth in it, but it really sung along the lines of the New Testament, like really close to it and stuff, and which was not necessarily how the story goes. And so part of this last translation that was done, or that I helped fund with a group of people, actually clarifies and clears up all that information. And just to give people a sample, like there's a story of, everybody knows the story of Jesus walking on water, right? Or maybe they don't, but the story goes that there was a storm and Jesus was walking on water to a ship, and where his disciples were, and they were fishing, and he supposedly calmed the waters and stuff. But in this new translation, it says that shortly after Emmanuel had given a sermon to his disciples, he was going to go and meditate, so he needed some time. And so the disciples said, yeah, okay, we're going to go fishing some of the disciples said, the ones that were there said, we're going to go fishing, and they went out, and about sometime later, maybe 2 hours or so later, when Emmanuel was done meditating, he wanted to find them again. And he saw that the boat wasn't too far off the shore, and so what he would do, what he did was take one of those standing board boats, where you stand on them and kind of pedal out. And so he wasn't walking on water; he was going across the water on a boat, according to this new translation and stuff. And something like that was falsified later on when I guess Paul had gone to I think it was Rome, or somewhere in Rome or Italy at the time, and had paid a scribe to write down his story, and through that the actual story was falsified because it wasn't remembered correctly, and different things were inserted into it.
Yeah, it seems to me like it doesn't matter what it is, as far as whether it's a Bible or whatever book it is that's been written by man. It seems to me like it's either censored or the translation is off. What's your take on that?
Oh, yeah.
It seems like you really can't trust it. And when you were talking about belief systems and letting go of belief systems and trusting the higher levels of consciousness, and I think that's really true, because in order to embrace what's really truth-based, you have to let go of the programming. And a lot of it is what I would consider to be mind control to some degree, because it's, literally there's just false belief systems. It's just this repetition, but really it's about the higher levels of consciousness where there's just pure energy and knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. And we can talk a little bit about that, like, the difference between, creation, or that which is, what we're in, is consistent, and it treats everybody pretty much the same. In other words, if you were to step off a cliff right now, it would smash you to the ground. And just as hard, if I was to step off a cliff, it would smash me to the ground. Or if you take the holiest of holy persons and they're walking by a building and a loose brick falls off, this is the guy who just gave his last dollar to feed a dying homeless man or something, or just gave away his house to a homeless family, whatever. Think of the most saintliest thing you can think of. Well, that brick's going to smash him really hard on the head, just as hard as it would smash a person that just got done murdering somebody. So in other words, creation doesn't really care about these egos. So when someone says, well, I have a personal God or something like this, they should really bring in these scenarios that are in their face should really come to light. Go, wait a second, so who's responsible throughout this whole thing, this scenario? And looking in the mirror and saying, I'm 100% responsible, or thinking about it and go, I'm 100% responsible for what I do, think, feel, and say. So you are the ultimate authority when it comes to, waking up. We talked a little bit about the revolution of consciousness, the waking up here.
Right. No, I agree with you on that one. Yeah, without a doubt. And what attracts you the most to the Meyer material? Is it about the consciousness aspect of it, and really more the philosophical side to the Meyer material? It seems like he's extremely philosophical, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, I would say that I've always, when I was younger, I would talk about things that were in a logical discord with the way I try to figure things out. One of the things was the idea of heaven and hell, because I would think that, okay, if this, being raised in the West here, we're taught about God and stuff, and I said, well, if this, I always pictured God as everything that is, right? So back in school, someone would say, hey, do you believe in God? And I'd say, no, I don't believe in God. I know God exists, which would usually make them mad. Well, how do you believe, or how do you know? And I go, because you're my definition for God. All this is, right? And so let's see. Anyways, the idea of heaven and hell would mean that a God would create heaven and hell, but what would this God get the material to create heaven and hell? Well, I was always thinking, well, if God is that which is. That's the only thing that is. So then it would have to create out of itself heaven and hell. So somewhere inside of itself, it would create a place where there's eternal burning and damnation. And the other place, as purported to me by people who are staunch believers, is a place of ever worshiping, which both places don't seem pretty don't seem like a place I would want to visit at all.
It seems like a state of mind, in my opinion. I mean, it's just basically based on, once again, belief systems. It's a construct.
And so this would all.
Right. And I almost lost you there for a second, Nate, just so you know. Hope I don't drop that signal again, but if I do, I'll call you back. But
oh, okay.
Yeah, so you dropped out for a second. You want to repeat that? Because I think we lost a few bits of the information there. At least I did. I couldn't.
All right, I was just Oh,
there he goes again. Hang on.
I can hear you, sort of.
That's okay. My Skype is hosed up. Hang on for a minute. I'm hoping my Skype doesn't drop out. If it does, I'll get somebody, like if Jerry B's around, to grab the server. I can hear you, Nate, so go ahead. But if you guys, it looked like I almost dropped out of Skype for a second there, so just so you guys know, if that happens, I'll be back online. But right now we're good. So go ahead, Nate.
All right. Yeah, just let me know. Where did I leave off? Or okay.
We're talking heaven and hell.
Heaven and hell. In the new translation, the Talmudic Manual, you may find another interesting fact that because the original book of Matthew came from Paul, or aka Saul, he had an inferiority complex when it came to women. He really despised women, and I don't, for whatever reason. But it turns out that according to this information, there were 19 female disciples. There were actually more female disciples than there are male disciples, which to me makes a lot more sense, because usually women are a lot more emotionally intelligent and pragmatic and listeners, for the most part. So that's piggybacking on the empowerment of women and the sacred feminine, things like that.
And it's interesting. We were just touching on it too earlier with my last guest about the sacred feminine, and how there's been such a disrespect about the divine feminine energies, and I think that's true. And I don't know if part of that is just the exploitation of mainstream and the way they portray females as being these imbeciles versus the intellectual, spiritually evolved women that they should really highlight. I think that's part of the problem, is that we have no role models for the real godhead of a real divine feminine. In my opinion, anyway. Nowadays on the timeline, it seems like it's very difficult to see that.
Yeah, that's true. I think because people, they try to mimic what kind of society has put forth for them, and you have this very, very poor worldview of women when it comes to most, if not all, religions. I haven't studied Bushido too much, but definitely the other religions of the world.
Oh yeah, it's very insulting. Coming from my background too, but where I come from, it's males and females are equals, whereas there's none of this one is superior over the other. And another thing that I look at too is that the soul, to me, is an androgynous thing. It's energy and consciousness. So it doesn't matter about the suit you're occupying, whether it's a male or a female. I think that's very ignorant for people to be discriminatory against a sex versus the consciousness in the design. They don't get it, right? So that's a whole different ballpark of energy, but truly that's what it's about.
Yeah, and even to further that idea, if to me, it's obvious that reincarnation is the fact of life, and I don't want to throw belief on that at all. I've worked it out. It makes perfect sense. Nature is completely cyclical. It recycles. Everything in nature we see is cyclical, and the idea of an instant stop or an instant stop to an instant paradise or stop to an instant hell doesn't make any sense at all, right? Especially through one life and whatnot. So I see life as a continuum. Plus, there's all those stories, not only the stories that are just hearsay, but there's actually stories out there that were proven to, how does this 5-year-old child know this information? and when some of these cases are able to go to the exact place where this person said they had died in a previous life, and find out that a lot of information that the person is telling aligns with this past life personality.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I agree with you. And of course, the death and the illusion of dying is just a continuation of the journey. I mean, we don't die in the illusion of. We drop our suits, but we go to another dimensional frequency. And I agree with you. I believe there are lives between lives. And so far as even before we incarnate back on the timeline, there's this living that's going on. There's this, whether it's a review of a life or whether it's learning on another dimensional space. I think there's so much that happens that people aren't aware of on a multidimensional level.
Right. I agree kind of with that. I think that learning never really stops, whether you're in a form without a body or a form with a body. But what's interesting about this is, you know, this makes us this goes back to the learning process. Is, you know, you are 100% responsible. You know, so if we make a planet that really puts down feminine energy, and we come back, and we come back as a, do you want to come back as a woman on that planet? We've got to think about these things. You know, if you're creating hatred towards your fellow man, do you really want to come back to that planet? If you're polluting the crap out of that planet, do you really want to come back to that planet? And I'm only speaking according to the information pertaining to the Meyer case that talks about that certain rules govern it. Like if you die on that planet, you will reincarnate on that planet. And so this pretty much makes sense. Basically, the energy form that is powering your body enters into the body at the 21st day, and you can see, as an effect, you can see the heart beating. The heart always starts beating on the 21st day. Then, you know, you can ask yourself, just sitting back and looking at two bodies, one's alive and one's dead, and everything is in the dead body that's in the alive body, but what's the difference? Well, the energy source or the power source just is not there. And this is just basic to me, but for some people, they're just like, no, that can't be. But that's fine. It's okay.
Right. It's always about belief systems. That's the bottom line, as you were touching on earlier. And once again, I mean, in my opinion, when people transfer out, they'll experience what they believe in. Because to me, this world is holographic to some degree, and our brains and the multiverse is holographic. So whatever they think about, whatever they manifest, is really what they're going to experience. And it may not even be true. It could be a false matrix, but it's based on their belief system. It's giving to you according to your beliefs. A lot of the time.
Right. So I think the key here would be then to, you know, try our best to approach reality with a neutral
Mm-hmm.
sense, and that is not a positive, not a negative, because those will lead to an imbalance of what actually is.
Right, I agree. Sacred of it's kind of like the sacred witness in the neutral space. I agree with you on that one too. And if people do get too emotionally charged about certain things, and I know everybody gets fired up about stuff. I get it too, but at the same time, there has to be this neutral stance, in my opinion. And I do see the more that I grow and evolve in the illusion of, I see so much what I call false belief systems, false matrices, and it seems to me like they're just falling away. They're falling away, you know, and I hope other people are starting to see it too. You know, they call it the awakening to some degree. I think people are waking up, but it's what they do in the moment that changes the reality. And if they just observe it and float around, well, that's not changing a whole lot. It's just, I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah. So like, my big thing is waking up. It's like, all right, because people say this, waking up, but oftentimes I've seen what happens is when people, they come out of one shell of belief and they move into another shell of belief, because this is how they were taught to handle reality. Case in point, a couple years ago, I had some Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door, and I was trying to explain to the person the difference between belief and knowledge. And I asked him, do you believe you're wearing shoes, or do you know you're wearing shoes? And he looked at me and said, I believe I'm wearing shoes. And this kind of threw me, because I'm looking at him. He's wearing shoes. He should know he's wearing shoes.
Mm-hmm.
There's no belief required.
Right. That's a very good point you make, and I'm really big on the knowing too. I have a knowing versus a lot of beliefs. Belief is for, and I don't want to bash anybody for believing anything, but to me, belief is people who don't know, who really don't understand, and want to have faith in something. To me, I have knowledge and knowing, and I think that's worth a lot. So I like to keep my benchmark in knowing versus believing and wishing. I can't go by that. That's like a ship with no sails to me.
Yeah, definitely. And well, someone might be out there and be really questioning, who's listening, and say, hey, what do I do with all this information then? Because you're sitting there talking, like, I mean, you kind of come on, you start talking about this guy Billy, and he's telling you these outrageous stories and stuff like this. And for me, for myself, I kind of put it in the realm of data.
Hmm.
Like, if I can, if you tell me, a parable, or some sort of small story that has some workable elements in it that I can help better my life, or help better understand a situation either now or later, I will incorporate that into my knowledge, right? If not, I leave it in the realm of data. Like, if I can't use it, okay, it's okay, it's there. I don't have to sway it to the positive or the negative, or say, okay, this is the absolute truth, or this is absolutely wrong, especially if I can't prove it.
Hmm.
So that's how you would handle something that you hear that's not something you can readily go about proving.
Hmm. Right. And I think there's something to be said about just doing research in general and just educating yourself. You don't have to believe in every single detail of information, but I think it's important to research stuff and take a look maybe once or twice at certain information, especially with the Billy Meyer material. I mean, I can honestly say there's not a I mean, some of the things I don't resonate with, but there are some things that I do think he's really good at on a philosophical level, and he's touched on a lot of things that are beyond the picture of what mankind has currently painted. So I think there's some good points he makes in his information. And I was going to ask you, with all the intensity going on in this world on the timeline, how would you say it correlates to the Meyer material insofar as prophecy goes?
Um, okay, so let me start by talking a little bit about what a prophecy is, versus what a prediction is. Um, a prediction is something that will happen, and there's nothing you can do to change it. That's a prediction. A prophecy, a prophecy is usually given in terms of something bad, and what it's for is it's saying, hey, if you see this happening, you're going the wrong way.
Hmm.
So there's much more human, and much more human element in that we can affect the outcome of prophecies. We can either they can never come true, or they will come true. um, and so, as we look at the current world situation, things are drastically deteriorating from where they could have gone. And this is because we haven't really raised our levels of consciousness to where they have to be. The war must begin with yourself, and that's how that's where it has to start.
Hmm.
We can't blame the mirror. Um, we have to look at ourselves, because we are the mirror is the product of what we are, collectively. So us talking about this and working on ourselves become these beacons, and that slowly will hopefully infect those out there. But as far as the prophecies go, well, let me just read a small paragraph here, out of the book, from printed in 2004, called "And Still They Fly." Um, Switzerland will be also severely affected, but will not be the actual target. This will be France and Spain. However, the main objective of the aggressors will be to bring all of Europe under their military control, and for that purpose, France will be selected to be the headquarters. France, a country that not only will be invaded by aggressors from the outside, but will also be conquered from within as a result of collaborative forces and other forces. This can be envisioned as being many as being the many foreigners of a different religion living in France at that time, and specifically Islam, which will be this force working from within.
Wow, what year was that written?
2000. This book I have in my hand was physically published in 2004. Those prophecies came out, I believe, in 1987.
He was good. He's good. I'll tell you that much. I mean, how can you dispute that?
So that that's that's just it. There, the material, has about 30,000 pages of information in it, and there's all kinds of stuff like this riddled through it. And not only that, it only works on, from what I've seen, it's working on a lot of clarification and honesty, and you may know or not know, or your listeners may know, but Billy never comes out and defends his information or anything. He just publishes it, and you can do what you want with it. So it's a very neutral process. It's like, here you go.
He's not attached to it, in other words, right? Or no?
Right. And one of the things that he had to go through as a quote unquote prophet is he had to do away with his materialism, like big time. So he went through many years, like he would give away his money. He wouldn't accept any pay for any work he did for anybody else or anything. And, this caused a huge rift in his first marriage. But a lot of this is documented. And it's very interesting. And the reason why he did that is because he needed to be able to tell the truth. And if you are attached to materialism or things of the material, you may second guess the truth that you need to deliver, or second guess the message you need to deliver. Oftentimes, which is the epitome of politics, by the way, I would say. Mm-hmm. That rhymes.
Yeah, it is.
So, for example, a politician, someone who's in politics may know what's right. Okay, but you know what? They're getting a nice paycheck from this guy. So if they say something that is going to make this guy look bad, they might not get that paycheck. So,
right, it's all about the kibble. That's what I always say. It's all about keeping that money rolling in.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the thing that people have been striving or struggling against, and to some extent is do I keep my my security, my employment, my job security, and just go with the rolling weirdness of the false matrix, or do we stand up and do something to make a change for the better on a bigger scale? So it is real interesting to watch this take its form.
Right, and another motivating thing for people who may not have money. People go, well, why can't I be honest? I don't have any money. Well, there's a lot of pride and ego that go into things, which is not really a money thing, but it's more of a saving face thing. You're around a certain, kids do this often a lot. They're around a certain crowd, and the crowd moves in one direction. Maybe they all wear a certain type of clothing that you probably hate, but you want to be a part of that crowd. So you don't become yourself. You're just like, okay, I'm now have to dress like them and act like and walk like them. Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, there's different reasonings, and there's different levels of materialism, and it's not only about, at the really high levels, I would say it's about power. Mm-hmm. Then the middle range level for most people, it's about not most maybe, but top middle would probably be for money. And then the bottom range would be for, saving face, ego. But ego can play, all through the whole thing, mm-hmm. side of self, how do I see myself, or how do I think others see me as? Mm-hmm. And let me act or react accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of peer pressure too, insofar as how that goes with mainstream, especially. So insofar as the end game. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go no.
I was just going to ask you, insofar as the end game goes, is it really just about global domination according to the Meyer material? Is it just about these religious fanatics trying to completely just monopolize belief systems and control the collective, or what's your take, and what's his take on that?
There is definitely an ebb and flow to growth, and so his take right now is the biggest problem the world suffers from is overpopulation. Not only is there all sorts of evils that are now magnified by it, but there's also I would say that is what it is, all kinds of evils magnified. So, but one of those evils is drowning out. Like, think of a teacher in a classroom, right? There's all kinds of people not having enough, for example. Think of a teacher in a classroom. There's 3 students. It's very easy to teach 3 students, communicate, to be one-on-one. Now, multiply that by 10. Now there's 30 students. It becomes a lot harder. Now at some schools there's even 40 to 50 students per classroom. Like, holy crud! Like, what we, it becomes this almost impossible balance. But like, also, it's a cause and effect relationship. We have the technology to live in abundance according to a certain population, right? We can make it so my suggestion would be to depopulate through attrition, which means to allow just don't have as many kids and allow the deaths to eventually, so we come down to more equilibrium or sustainable population. I mean, there's a lot of so part of this. What I found, like, if I enter into I'll go to a party or something, I kind of have to shut down all my my intuitions and stuff, because they get overwhelmed. There's too much going on. It's pollution in a sense,
Right.
So being like in a planet, if thoughts could be measured, which they can be, science has proved this, thoughts are actually our wavelength. Well, those wavelengths are beaming out of everybody's head at the speed of light, which is interesting. But how far do they go? Do they go all the way around the planet? Inside the cities, maybe they dissipate some time out, but all kinds of crazy thinking comes across, at least for me in my experience. Like, in the worst time is coming home in traffic from after work. You get these random thoughts like where did that come from? Is that my thought or someone else's thought? What's going on here?
Right. Yeah, well, because everybody's like a hive collective to some degree. Well, I am a firm believer that consciousness in motion is really powerful. I mean, as somebody who has a healing background, I've done distant healing work on people before around the world, and they felt it. So I do know that consciousness and intent alone does affect people across the board insofar as space, time, and the illusion goes. But I think it can vary depending on the evolution of a person and their psychic ability and how powerful their brains and minds are insofar as connection goes. But that's another thing too, when you talk about evil and magnification of evil. Is there something Billy touches on insofar as what causes this imbalance of evil? What makes people evil versus people who are just good souls? Is it a contamination by some kind of an entity, or what's your impression of that?
No. If everybody's self-responsible, then the epitome of evil is usurping that self-responsibility, because everybody has the same spark in it, and the spark is already built on life. And if life can be judged as good, then it already has that foundation of good and moving upwards. Now we want to think in terms of religion, then we think in terms of sin, but this makes no sense to the world of nature. It's, you made a mistake. That's all it is. And what led to that mistake? Well, there was a thinking or a thought process that led to that mistake. And what needs to be fundamentally changed is that thought process that mistake came from.
Mm-hmm. Right, course correction to some degree.
Right. So everything is like, babies do this. When they learn how to walk, they fall down, they hurt their knee. Now, what if you go, and they get angry, they get mad, so they might thrash around. So when an adult does this, it becomes like a very degenerate, evil act. When an adult gets pissed off or does this, but when a baby does, they're just throwing a tantrum, or they're hurt. And so I see a lot of times people get hurt and they don't really have a place and understanding of their place. They lack empathy, or they lack a course correction in their thought process, and this can lead to greater and greater depravity and degeneration, to the form where it's taken with the ISIS group.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, those guys seem so disconnected from spirit in all forms and designs. I mean, to me, it seems like a no-brainer to be kind to your fellow man, to have compassion. I'm not saying you have to be Mary Poppins, but be decent, be courtesy, just courtesy. That's all. Be respectful. And it seems to me like this is a huge deal, even for everybody, even in when they get under to a point where they're very stressed out. I mean, they lose it. They just get rude. And I think people need to take a step out of themselves for a second and really take a breath, because we're being bombarded with all this drama. And it seems like it's just one big storyboard of propaganda to some degree, but at the same time, it's all been created and manufactured. So, but I look at people like that, the evil people, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what possesses people to be that evil. And, animal abusers come to mind, these scumbags. I just can't for the life of me figure out what causes them to be so damn evil,
Right. Well, I think maybe somewhere in their mind, several things come to mind. First, does the person know that they're being evil? I mean, if their goal is, the idea of the ends justify the means, then, to them, they're like, well, I'm doing a good thing, but for someone who lacks, that would be someone who's clever that might lack wisdom. And as far as the other people that would be like hurting animals and stuff, I've seen this in people that make a mistake. They don't like the feeling of guilt, so they try to change the feeling of guilt by making that same mistake again and again and again. And I think this is actually what's at the root of the victim syndrome. When maybe a woman gets with an abusive boyfriend and stays with that person, they're somehow justifying in their head that the way they're treated is correct, but they have to work very hard on themselves to think like that, or they were raised in a very abusive environment and they had never self-corrected, never did the work they needed to do to clear that out, and they just, life will do that. This is a learning experience.
Programming to some degree, I would say. Now, once again, it's about programming these belief systems that are non-productive. I consider some people to have a brain virus, and I know that sounds kind of harsh, but it seems to me like these people who are just plain wicked and defective in their personalities have some kind of a bleeding virus that's just poisoning their souls or their spirits. And that's just the way I perceive them. That's the way I see them, is there's something wrong with their brains. They're not firing right. So
right. And over time, that's definitely going to happen, especially if you dwell on something long enough. You're talking earlier about manifesting a type of reality. So if you think about it, a lot of these people that have these problems with their brain. Let's take this a little bit apart. So in meditation, oftentimes it's about observing your thoughts and not engaging them. A lot of people say, "Oh, I can't do that," and whatnot, but that's what it's about. So from my understanding, feelings and emotions can oftentimes arise from, or always arise from, thought. Either it's a conscious thought or unconscious thought, but that feeling arises and then gives justification for further thinking to either increase or decrease that.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I know you have a study group that you also do, right, Nathan? Are you there? You broke up for a second there. I'm sorry.
Your thought?
No, I was going to say you were breaking up just a little bit there, and I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I'm here.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, but it was interference, and I was just going to ask you, insofar as your study group goes, you still have a study group, correct?
Yes. I try to go once a month. It only happens once a month up in Arizona, Munns Park area.
Okay, and that's the Billy Meyer contact reports?
Yeah, actually, we study more or less the spirit teachings. There's a really good one we studied the last meeting called the Might of the Music.
Nice.
And it's actually fun side story here. A friend of mine, when I was young, claimed he had the ability to tell when somebody is lying to him. And I thought this was interesting. And he demonstrated several times that, oh, this person's lying. And then sooner or later, it came to the forefront that, he was correct. This person was lying. And he said ever since he could remember, he had that ability. And so when this came out just recently, it was recently translated. It talked about music being, if you engaged harmonious music, you actually work on harmonizing your psyche. So you're able to tell when something strikes you that's disharmonious or unharmonious instantly. So my friend was also, or is also, a Beatles and 60s music buff. So that's all he would ever listen to. Very happy go lucky music.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it like that this is an ability that people can consciously create. Like any muscle in the body, they can have this ability to tell when someone's lying to them, all by simply engaging and listening to very harmonious music.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I think it's part of the psychic radar, whether it takes on the form of sound, frequency, or empathy. It's definitely there. There's no doubt about it. Now, that's quite interesting. Have you experienced any quote unquote UFO sightings in your studies with the Billy Meyer material?
Um, I've had the fortunate. I've always had this luck. I would say I would call it luck as I look back. In my life, every time I tried to adopt a belief, I was always hit with the reality in the opposite direction. And it just so happened that on one of these nights, I had a friend who was talking about when he was in a refugee camp in the Philippines, that he would see things in the sky all the time, and he just said, yeah, I've seen them before. And I'm like, I got really like emotionally, because I was like, I've never seen them, and I feel kind of left out. And so they don't exist, they're not real, and all this other stuff. And it just so happens that night we were out, and I looked over toward the eastern horizon, and I saw these two ships. They were green. They shot from one end of the sky to the next end of the sky in like 3 seconds. It was crazy because they were really high up. But I was like, wow, look at that. And my friend's like, yeah, no, I know. I just told you I've seen them before. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. So, but that just allowed me to keep myself clear of, stay open-minded to the possibility that, something's out there. Then I would say 11 years ago, I came out of the company I used to work for, and I was working a late night, and I came out with a guy. I believe his name was Atsuchi, and we were walking, and it's nighttime. And the first thing I do, anytime I come out of work and it's night, is I look up, because wow, yes, I'm out of that box.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the sky. It's open like my mind, I hope. And so I look up, and about 4 stories up is this little orange glowing bobbing ball. It looked like, and I was just like, oh, hey, check this out. And I looked at the guy to have him look up where I was looking, and he was just scared. I don't know. It was weird, because I was more disappointed. I mean, so I see a little phenomena 4 stories up. I don't know what it is. It's just interesting to me. Mm-hmm. But this guy was just like, his whole paradigm would have been blown if he would have looked up. I don't know what it was or anything. But I was more disappointed than I was excited to see it, that he wouldn't look up.
Wow, interesting. Yeah.
So
keep your nose to the ground, huh?
Right. And so, I mean, that's a lot of people with their belief systems. They don't want anything that will disrupt it, because they are afraid of themselves. So they kind of keep on giving up their power. And so fast forward to about 3 or 4 years ago, when I was looking through the material, um, I came across what was called a picture of a small, like 5-inch round telemeter disc, and description of what it was and what their purpose are, and occasionally that they're seen by people. They enter into the visible spectrum. So I'm pretty sure that's what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, so aside from those two things, I haven't really seen anything else. But I thought they were interesting at the time.
Yeah, it's always interesting to have some kind of anomalous visual that shows up in between the spaces of your psyche. There's no doubt. Now, you are working on children's books, is that right?
Yeah, and how that came about was I'm there's a lot of information, and I always like to tell stories to get people to kind of think about things. Um, one of the things that we're told when we were little was sticks and stones may break my bones, but names may never hurt me. But that only carries on for, I don't know, as you're small, I guess. But because it loses the message, and like today you hear about people getting blasted on Facebook and they can't handle someone else talking bad stuff about them, and it's just this huge disconnect of like you're not responsible for the way you feel. This something outside of you has made you feel like this, and therefore. So I would always tell people this little story or parable, and I'll tell it to you right now. It's very quick. So there's this mean old man. He gets his joy from bringing misery to people, and there's this field where two kids are playing. One kid's playing at one end of the field, and another kid's playing at the other end. So he goes up to the first kid and he says the meanest, wickedest, dirtiest, nastiest things you could think about, and the kid just starts crying and crying, and the mean old man feels really, really good about what he did. So he's like, I'm on a roll, and he's gonna go over and tell the other kid. So he stomps across the field, and the other kid's there, and he says the same exact things he said to the first kid, with the same exact tone and the same exact demeanor. And the other kid looks up and goes back to playing. And I say, what's the difference between the two kids? And it's very simple. Um, the second kid doesn't speak the language that the first kid does. So this was there to help people think about what effect words really have, because what people have to do when they hear something they don't like is they have to internalize it, attack themselves with it, and then react to that internalized attack towards the other person. And that's a way of giving up your power, especially if you don't recognize you're doing that. So I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I've taken her to Barnes and Nobles many times, and a lot of the little children's books there are absolutely horrible. There is no redeeming quality about any of those books. They're really, really bad. I don't know if you've seen them.
No, I haven't, but I wouldn't be surprised.
So bad. So I really wanted to kind of reflect on some of the stuff that I picked up from the Meyer material, and some of the teachings that I think can help people gain their power back, and also help them evolve their consciousness. And so a story that's told that could work at a very infant level to an adult level. If you heard it as an adult, it would it would mean something. If you heard it as a child, it would mean something. That's kind of what my goal is here. And so I have my niece. I've finished one script. I'm working on another one. I have my niece. She's an artist, doing the artwork for it, and hopefully sometime next year it will be done.
And Nate, we're getting ready to wrap this up in like 2 minutes plus or minus, but it's been really wonderful to have you on tonight. I'm glad you joined us for the second hour.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been it always goes by really fast. I'm always have a lot of anxiety before I
No.
go
You
on.
know, you're going to have
Gosh.
to come back because last time we were talking with Mark Snyder, we all did a little mini roundtable. It was a lot of fun. But if anybody wants to get in touch with you, is there a way to do that?
They could email me or yeah, I think that's probably the best way. I had a site, but it got just recently got destroyed. I should say hacked.
Mm.
Um, it's just funny because by trade I'm a web developer.
So they hacked. Was that because of Billy
Anyways,
Meyer material or what?
actually, I think it's because I had an ISIS Now blog, and I was talking about how different, just we need to put we need to eradicate this. This is like a cancer. ISIS is like Nazis. That's all they are. They're Nazis
Mm-hmm.
to the nth degree,
Oh,
and
somebody got
we
upset
can't.
with that. Oh well.
Yeah, yeah. After that, I got like slowly. I don't know. It was interesting. I'm speculating here, though. I don't have proof that that's the reason, but my site was fine, and all of a sudden it wasn't shortly after I launched this. So it's like
Interesting.
okay,
I smell a rat with
but
that one for sure.
yeah, that's funny. I could go. Yeah, we don't have time though. But
No,
okay,
next
so
time you're gonna have to come
it's
back, Nate. Well, what is your email address?
Nat Drip DRIP NATDRIP at gmail.com.
Okay, so if they have any questions on Billy Meyer or whatever they want to ask you, that's wonderful. I want to thank you so much for joining us. And once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And please stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecky coming up next to Celiana tonight from Down Under, as they always do with their fabulous show here. So we have a baby. I think we're going to run out of time here, but is Billy still writing? Oh, we did. Is he still writing contact reports, Nate?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Solaris.
Thank you. You take care. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.